Let's assume that the random number selected is 622. That means that we have picked a selection in this random number table that has 4 digits 0, 6, 2, 2. And that's why we get the number of 622 as our random number. We will use this number and the sampling interval of 1,236 and 26 to identify locations of 19 interviews. Before we get into step number 5, we're going to work out with this particular table in order to identify the locations of the 19 interviews. And for doing so, we are going to come up with a table with 3 columns. As you see here in the slide, the first column will be the LQAS number, all those 19 interviews or locations that we want to select. Then a column for the calculations that we are going to explain in a few minutes. And then the interview location. We're going to start again with our random number that we picked, that is 622, and we're going to make use of the sampling interval calculated before, which for our example is 1,236.26. The location of the first interview is the random number, and for that reason, in the first row, for the first interview, the random number equals to the location of number 1, that is 622. The location number of the second interview is equal to the random number 622 plus the sampling interval. So for our particular example, that is 622 plus 1,236 and 26, which will give us a number of 1,858 and 26, marked here in red. So that will be our location for the second interview. Going on with the third row, to identify the location of our third interview, we will rely on the location of number 2, just previously identified, and we will add again that sampling interval. So that will be 1,858 and 26 plus our sampling interval. That will give us the location of our third interview, which would be 3,094 and 52. And we will continue this process for all the 19 locations that we want to obtain. Once we have this information, the interview location in our particular supervision area A, we are ready now to do step number 5, which is the final step in order to identify randomly the communities or towns in one supervision area. So this is kind of like a summary table where we have the communities, all the communities and towns in supervision area A, their respective total populations, the cumulative population, and then the interview location number that we just previously identified before. And then with all this information, we are ready now to identify out of all the communities in supervision area A, for our example, which ones will be picked randomly to be interviewed. The location of the first interview is the first community on the list with a cumulative population equal to or larger than the random number. So for our example, if with a random number of 622, we will skip community number 1, which is Pagai, as its cumulative population is less than our random number of 622. Therefore, the community in which the 622nd person is located is in Santai. That is the second community that has a cumulative population of 1,278. Now, to locate the second interview, we need to find the community in which the 1,858th person is located, and that will be in the community of Serena, as Serena has a cumulative population of 1,964. Therefore, we will identify here our second interview, our second community that will be selected to conduct the interview. The location of the third interview will be the first community on the list with a cumulative population equal to or greater than 3,094 and 52. And that will be the community that we called Fanta, as Fanta has a cumulative population of 3,500. So this will become our next community randomly selected to conduct the interview. Once again, all this information that we are presenting in this table is coming from the previous 4 steps. Identifying the communities along with the population sizes, then with the cumulative population, and also with the interview location number, which is identified first with a random number and then with the use of a sampling interval. We will be able to identify these location numbers. Once we have all these 4 pieces of information, communities, populations, cumulative population, and the interview location numbers, then we will be able to identify all the 19 communities where we are going to conduct the survey. Notice what happens in the town of Pingra. Pingra will be the location of 3 interviews because of its relatively large total population of 3,504, which is the largest on the list. There are 3 location numbers: 9,278, 10,512, and 11,748 that fall within the cumulative population of 12,559. For this particular reason, Pingra will have 3 interviews to conduct. Notice also what happens with the next location number, that is 12,984. It doesn't even fall within the next town of Kanata, but it does so in Servish. And actually the next location number, 14,220, still falls within Servish, which means we will conduct 2 interviews in the town of Servish, simply because its cumulative population, 15,010, is equal or larger than these 2 interview location numbers. So it is through this way that we can identify all 19 locations within the supervision area A that are randomly selected based on an initial random number. For our example, that was 622, a sampling interval, and the cumulative populations of all communities located in supervision area A. The same process is repeated for all the other supervision areas B, C, D, and E. We are now assuming that we have identified the locations for the 19 interviews in each of the supervision areas. And now we would like to select households to visit in those randomly selected locations, those yellow areas shown here in this particular example for supervision area A. And once we identified the households, then we're going to see how to select a suitable respondent in those households.